Welcome everybody. Thank you for coming. Appreciate it a lot. So this week's Sedra, just in passing, we have a pasuk, Tchaya, a witch you shouldn't allow to live. And there's a lot of interesting things in that. It's worded a bit strangely. Does that mean based in why only a witch, not why a female witch instead of a wizard? But we're not actually going to delve into that pasuk in the fashion over there. We're going to use that as a springboard, as an excuse to examine this sugya of magic in general. Not really halachically, but in terms of machshava, in terms of what it is and why is it forbidden. So I've got a school sheet here. I don't know if people have downloaded it. You don't need it to follow, but it could be quite helpful. Well, so now what I'm going to set up, she has a story at the whole topic has a story. I did it as essay for university, and I think I found the chiddush that basically one was saying. I read up a lot about it. So that's what I'm going to present today. Hopefully, a new understanding of this, like the topic. I actually didn't present this in uni, so I made the source sheet for university. That's why it's all in English. I didn't present it in uni because Corbyn was being elected. Not Corbyn was being elected. There was the election results the next day, so I did it all night with my friends instead. It was better off than uni. I listened to a couple of podcasts today from academics about magic, and they even, partly that's still why they're into their PhDs, they haven't come to this understanding of magic. And so hopefully we're going to try and push a new understanding of the definition of magic and why is it forbidden between the Ramban and the Rambam. So generally, if you ask what is magic, what is kishuf? Why is kishuf forbidden? Why is it not allowed? So everyone's definition normally, and from all these podcasts as well, is it's very hazy, it's very blurry. What's the line between magic and the line between magic, superstition, and the occult, all of these buzzwords, and science and rationality and causality and proper understanding of tapping into the workings of the universe seem very blurred. Often when people try and define magic, what I've seen is the definition is very unclear. We need to define it in order to know what the acts that are forbidden are, and then why does the Torah come and forbid it. Firstly, just as an aside, there are two types of magic. One is seeing into the future. The other one is manipulating human destinies and events. We're only going in the second one because seeing into the future, because this is where the big machlokes is in the Rishonim. Seeing into the future it could be a completely different one, and is not seen potentially by a lot of the Rishonim as an abomination. It's only seen, we have nevuah instead of other ways of finding out the future, and so we're not allowed to find out the future. But we're going into manipulating the future, manipulating other people, other nations. This type of magic is what we're looking into. This type of magic. So generally, if you've got the sheet, the first source in the sheet is just from an article in The Guardian. He defines magic as a supernatural plane, that there's the natural world. The natural world is essentially, what do we mean by when we say we're in nature? It's a sealed box, like the world is in a box. And then there's rules. It's an entire system with governed rules. There's gravity, solids, liquids, and gases, cause and effect. And everything runs according to this order, according to this laws and system. And magic would mean tapping into some sort of supernatural powers that subvert all these laws, all this system. It's a way of saying, like, it's true normally when I heat something up, for example, I don't know, when I heat something up and you need fire, this magic will mean that I can use water to heat it up, meaning it's not going according to the rules of the box that we live. It's not going to the natural rules of the universe. That's often how magic is seen, and that's how I've also seen it explained by also many Jewish authorities, Rosh Hashanah, Sefkin, MC Yaakov, and I think Pasha Shmos talks about it, and a few Rabbanim also that have met at weddings just said, like, oh, it's something we can't understand. It's another plane that we can't understand. Except what's the problem with this idea? When at least, and this could be true for other Rishonim, but when you look into the Ramban or the Rambam, you find that magic is not. This is not magic. Magic is not some supernatural, unscientific, completely subversive way of manipulating the world. Rather, it's fully scientific. What do I mean by that? It's a law of nature, or it's tapping into the laws of nature that we know. It's fully within nature and can be scientifically explained. And so here I've got this probably it says here, the second source is functioning with an appropriate causal framework. Magic was just another form of technology or applied science. So magic was science. Magic is science. I'm heating up the food in a scientific way, a way that I can be explained with the laws of nature. But for some reason, the Torah comes and forbids it. And so now we have a completely different view of magic. We have a clear and concise definition, and it's no longer blurry or fuzzy. Magic is a type of technology or science, a way of manipulating the world that can be explained. So that's the first thing. Okay, so now we're going to go into the Ramban. So the Ramban says, two schools of thought that we're going to look into. The Ramban says magic is real and is a genuine force, but the Torah comes and forbids it. And the Rambam says it's complete nonsense, it's rubbish, and the Torah still comes to ban it. So now we have two questions on both of them. We have a question on what if it's a genuine force, how is it a genuine force for the Ramban? And then why did the Torah ban it? And for the Rambam, we have why is it rubbish and false? And then why did the Torah ban a falsehood? Why does it, if it doesn't work and if it doesn't do anything, if it has absolutely no power or force, why does the Torah come and forbid it? So is everyone with me? Because now we're going to zoom into the Ramban. The Ramban says it's a genuine force. Again, we've explained. We will see explicitly that magic is a science. It's a technology. It's it irrationally worked, meaning we're in the rules of this box. We're in the rules of the universe, of the world. And so, what is this world? What are the rules of the box? So the reason why most people don't understand magic this way is because the way we look at the box has changed. And that's why people don't appreciate that magic is just a science. From ancient times and across civilizations and into the Middle Ages and even into the contemporary times, the people have thought that the world, as in planet Earth, which they thought was below the moon, just because they have a different structure of how the planets are arranged, that the world is governed by the stars. That's what they believed. And as in scientifically, that's what they believed, meaning they thought that was the genuine ordered system of the world. This wasn't hocus pocus. This is how they thought the world functioned, how nature, the cycles of nature and the tides and the moon worked. And so that's astrology. So they're taking, sorry, that's not astrology.
Hello, mate. Got your tea. Oh, could you pop it down here?
Yeah. So that's how they believed the world works, through the stars. So so what is magic? Magic. So the Ramban explains. If we look at not the first Ramban, if you look at the source number 3, the Ramban says he placed on earth all things, and thereupon in the power of stars and constellations. These are the mazalas. Over the mazalas, over the stars, in the Ramban's language, there's malachim and sarim, there's angels and officers. So there's planet Earth. Planet Earth is governed by stars, and the tilting of the stars is what governs the natural phenomena of planet Earth. And what controls the stars is these angels that tilt the stars in certain ways that affect the natural world. And that is what you'd find in a science book, meaning that is not Kabbalah, or that, I mean, what Kabbalah is something else, but that is not superstition or hocus pocus, or that is the science of the day. And so the Ramban explains, he goes into it, what exactly it is. You light certain incense and you draw a picture of the star. You draw a picture of that particular muzzle that you want to manipulate at a certain time. But the Ramban explains what is keshef, what's magic. Magic is manipulating the angel that controls a star to then change the world in a different way. And that is magic. But so is everyone with me for the Ramban? We've now explained magic's a science. Like I want to boil my water, I turn on the gas. If I want to manipulate nature, I manipulate the angel that controls the star that controls nature. Very simple. But the problem is, not the problem, the reason why the Ramban believed it worked and magic was a genuine force and real was because he didn't just believe in the lunary bodies, the stars and the planets, influenced our world, the sublunar world, planet Earth. The Ramban also thought it goes a step further. Not only do the stars govern the natural world and control the natural world, the stars also control human destiny. and they control a human being as well. So he takes it a step further. That's also implicit in the science at the time. If you look at source 2, I found in a footnote of some like obscure academic article, a Roman astrologer that basically says exactly the same as the Ramban lays out, which is that we're human beings, and planet Earth is governed by the influence of the stars. If you look at the Rivet in Hilchos Tshuva by free will, he also explains similar like this about free will, that we can jump out of our muzzle. And if you look at all the Rishonim, they all speak about it, and even in the Gemara and Mazalas, and it's this idea that we're controlled, that human destiny is to an extent controlled by the stars as well. So we have the natural world and human destiny controlled by the stars. What do I do if I want to manipulate what the stars are going to how the stars are going to control nature? I simply put the angelic officer that's controlling the planet, and then change the outcome on planet Earth. I can maybe make you have a bad day. I can make you have a good day. Maybe I can change coronavirus. I don't know. And that is kishuf. That is magic for the Ramban. It's a science and technology. Is everyone with me?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, we're with you, Gav.
Now we have to ask. Oh, okay, brilliant. So now we have to ask for the Ramban, why is it banned? Why does the Torah come and forbid it? Why is it important? How is it from other normal sciences? And some explanations. The Sefer HaChinuch says because this always. Sorry, I'm going to put my hotspot on. It says my Wi-Fi is happy. And so there's a few approaches, and the Rambam there in Dvarim, when he's talking about magic, he gives us an approach. He says, because very simply, God wants us that the world may be left to its ordinary conduct and natural state. And I think if I'd ask people here, they would give that explanation as well. There's something sinister, and there's something we're playing God when we manipulate the destiny of the world, the natural world, and the human destiny in such an overt way. It's changing nature, it's changing the state of nature that God clearly wants the world to run by. It's so subversive, it's so a human being putting himself out there so much against God's creation that there's something rebellious about that. And that's why the Torah forbids it. And Rabbeinu Bachar says this explicitly. He quotes Rabbeinu Hanana, who says it's an act of rebellion against God to do magic. So far makes a lot of sense, although obviously boundaries need to be drawn between normal applications of science and magic. We do understand now why, and the Ramban explicitly explains why magic is forbidden. But anyone that's familiar with the Ramban and La Torah would already realize there's something lurking beneath this. There's some meta reason. There's some great and broader picture here that ties into the Ramban's philosophy and worldview as a whole. That's also involved in why magic is banned in the Torah for the Ramban. Why is that? Because the Ramban is obsessed. He always explains this idea of mazalos, the natural world, the framework of the natural world, and he explains that the Jewish people in the land of Israel are entirely different. If anyone's familiar with the Ramban Amos and his Joshua Rosh Hashanah, it's where it's most explicated and explained. And the Ramban explains that the source 1, God created the heavens and the earth, and each and every nation in their respective lands, a known constellation and zodiac. So a star to govern them. So every land plot was, every nation of the world was assigned a plot of land. And above that plot of land, what governed the nation and the natural world within that plot of land was a certain star, a certain muzzle, with the angelic officer tilting the star to control it. And so every land, the Persian Empire, the Roman Empire, every different empire, nation had a different muzzle around it. But the Jewish people in the land of Israel were entirely different. He says, but the Jewish people were apportioned, they are in this plot of land in the land of Israel, the small section in the center of the earth, was not under any muzzle at all. It was under the direct governance and guidance of God. And the Jewish people were to reside there, were to live there, fulfilling the tenancy agreement of God, the rental contract of God, i.e. the laws of the Torah, to keep them clean and purified and unpolluted enough to remain in this land that has a window completely without being controlled by any forces other than God. And this ties into the Ramban on Nissim, this ties into the Ramban on Mashkafa, the Ramban on Tefillah, to the Ramban in seeking doctors instead of Nevi'im, to loads and loads of things. And this is why the Shah and Yeshiva Shah is so central in the Ramban's thought. And so knowing this idea of the Ramban, that Israel and the Jewish people in Israel should be not under any muzzle, we maybe could suggest in the Ramban, although he doesn't say explicitly there in Dvarim when he's talking Tamim Tiyah and Shem Nekachah, the reason for the prohibition and ban on magic, we can say that maybe we can say, and this I read in Source 8, that for the Ramban maybe there's a deeper fundamental problem with performing magic, manipulating the zodiacs. And what is that? Is that a Jew by definition residing in Israel in the land under Elokei Haaretz, under the it should highly not under any planet. It shouldn't jump under the influence of the planet and start manipulating them and tweaking human destiny and playing with these astral forces, because he should be elevated beyond nature. He should be living in Israel above the normal natural plane, above this box, above nature, and he should be dependent on God. And yeah, and that this is the idea of the Ramban's worldview. Potentially, the Ramban sees the best level of man, of man's perfection and dependency on God, is to reach complete bitachon and resting on God, having nevuah and godly help to heal his physical needs, instead of going to doctors, instead of living under nature, as is well known. And there's loads of Rambans on that idea, and it all fits together. And that ends part one, which is the Ramban's laying out of magic. So very quickly, what did we say? So magic is a normal scientific act. It's a normal technology. It means manipulating the astral forces, the angels and the stars, to tell them in a different way to manipulate events down here on Earth, human events and natural events, because the planets control both nature and human destiny. And for the Ramban, it's not allowed, firstly, because the state of nature is how God intended the world to run. And maybe, possibly, as we suggested, we brought it back to the Ramban's more fundamental worldview, which is that the Jewish people and the Jews should live in Israel outside of these natural forces and not bother himself by normal science, live just under the direct divine providence and guidance from God in the land of Israel, which is unadulterated and is not blocked by normal natural forces in an ideal era. So that is the Rambam. Now, what is the Rambam, who was hugely controversial, and he is in the complete other side of this debate by magic. The Ramban turns around and says, very famously, in Hilchot Zion, in the 11th parak, he says, Ramban is all sheker v'chazav. It's all complete falsehood. It's nonsense. It's rubbish. And hold on. What's he disagreeing with? What's he disagreeing with? And then why does the Torah come and ban it? What, the Torah is going to come and ban every rubbish thing? Everything that doesn't actually do anything is the Torah going to come and ban? What's the Rambam's understanding of magic? We're now jumping to the whole other camp, the whole other school of thought, which is the Rambam, and he says magic doesn't work. It's not a genuine force. So let's delve into it. What's the Rambam saying? So the Rambam saying, why is magic not true? The Rambam holds, like the Greeks and like the medieval scientists and Aristotle, that the world is structured and the natural world is indeed governed by these heavenly spheres, by the stars and the planets. The world's at the bottom, and how Aristotle, it was basically a line of different planets and the world's at the bottom, and the intellect's power the spheres, and then the spheres powered our natural world. So the Rambam's not disagreeing with this basic model, this basic ancient and then medieval model of how the world is structured and how the natural world is governed. But the Rambam says, unlike the Rambam says it's true that the stars govern the natural world, but the stars don't govern human destiny. We blurred it all together. If now you notice in the Ramban, in the Ravid, in the Sefer HaChinuch, in Rabbeinu Bachya, they blur it together. They thought that the world was indeed structured, is indeed organized this way, that the stars have the control, both the natural world, the seasons and the trees and the moon and the tides, and it also controls human destiny, our futures and our outcomes and whether we're harmed or not. The Rambam says, no, that's complete rubbish. that is what he's disagreeing. And the second he says that's complete rubbish, magic as a force, magic as a scientific act of manipulating the stars to change human destiny also falls away, right? Also, memela, automatically, it's also rubbish. It also becomes nonsense. And that's why the Rambam considers magic to be a falsehood, considers it to be rubbish. Why does the Rambam say that the planets don't govern human destiny? Very simply, he says, firstly, and this is crucial to the Rambam, he says, firstly, the Greeks disproved it. So the Greek scientists disproved it. He has a letter to the sages of southern France, which is a long piece against astrology, astrology is the science of the stars telling our futures and affecting our destinies. So the Rambam famously, we just said, the Rambam says that astrodeterminism, that the stars can affect human beings and their futures, is rubbish. And he says, firstly, the Greeks disproved it scientifically. And secondly, it goes against the Torah because it impacts on our free will. For the Rambam, free will is, as Rabbi Sachs said, free will is the 14th ikka, the Rambam, is the 14th fundamental of his faith. Why the Rambam doesn't list it as mainly about God's religion, not about human beings. But as in Hilchos Tshuva, it's clear, as in it's clear in the Rambam, as in it's clear anyway, that we need free will in order for the Torah to have any point. Because the Torah is a book of rules of what we should do. We're only given rules of what we should do if we can then not do it. As in we need free will. Without free will, as the Rambam says, is the pillar on which the Torah stands. And astrodeterminism, this idea that the stars affect, influence our destiny, contradicts free will, so both free will and science. So then for the Rambam's amazing, because the Rambam in several places then explains how it came to be that all of ancient civilization and the medieval world, even so, came to believe in astrodeterminism. They came to believe in astrology. They came to believe that the stars do, like the Ramban and all the Rishonim that were created, that the stars do affect human destiny. And this is where the Rambam explains, for the Rambam, Avodah Zarah, idolatry, is intimately connected with star worship and astrology. And the Rambam charts in a few places the history, the development of astrodeterminism, and the motives behind why it came to emerge. So the Rambam very famously, the first paragraph of Hilchos Avodah Zarah, most people present it as a history of idolatry, but if you read it closely, it's not, that's being too broad. It's a history of star worship. And the history of star worship came to be the second stage of it. The first stage is people were misguided. So the Rambam in the first line, admits to this scientific idea that the stars do in fact control the natural universe. And everyone agrees that. That's what the Rambam says. God created stars and spheres which control the world. But then people were misguided and said the stars control our world, so let's show them honor. And that's the first stage of how idolatry came to be. The misguided masses turned first with Enosh, in the third generation after Adam, after the first man on earth, turned to show honor to the stars because they're servants of God. But then arose false prophets, and the false prophets added the second layer. The false prophets added, and the Beis added, that the stars don't just control the natural world, they also control human beings. And that is astrodeterminism, and that was completely invented by charlatans, by false and deceivious prophets who had other motives in mind. And that is Avodah Zarah proper, that is idolatry proper, and that is a false belief invented by these charlatans. End of Hilchos Avodah Zarah Aleph. The Rambam in another place, in Perish Mishnayos, explains the motives behind these false prophets. He says these false prophets, the motives were they were priests linked to the political leaders of different countries. And they thought that in order to unite the country collectively as one nation, and to ensure stability, they would create a religion where everyone can band together. And that was separate to the other nations. So they picked up a zodiac and a certain star and sign, and they said this controls human destiny in order to achieve a government unity and stability and for the ruler to have control over the population. And so that was the motive behind the Beis, and that's how they came to be. So that, according to the Rambam, is the rise of astrodeterminism, which is synonymous, which is the same as Avodah Zarah, star worship. And that's when now we understand how, for the Rambam, the stars affecting our human destiny is rubbish, is nonsense. And that's why he says that it's like Kishuf, that magic is just shakeh v'chazak. It's just falsehood. But we have to ask, okay, very nice, it's falsehood. We get the Rambam, it's proper clear. But for the Rambam, though, why does the Torah come out and ban it? And why do we kill witches? So what's that about? Why is it so important to come out and ban it? It's just nonsense. So the Rambam lists 4 reasons in the end of Perek Yud Aleph of the 11th chapter. In chapter 13, he goes through them. He says, and this is source, sorry, not in chapter 13, it's source 13 I put on the sheet. All the above matters are falsehood. In order to lead the original idolaters deceive the Gentile nations, in order to lead them after them. So already have a glimpse where the Rambam expands in his Perish Mishnayos, which is what we said before, the motives of the false prophets of the Nevi'at Shaka. That was in order to lead them after them, in order for political and governmental stability. And that everyone should band together and that they can then rule over this population that then believed in the same religion. He says it's not fitting for Jews who are wise sages to be drawn after such emptiness. So firstly, Jews are prized for intelligence, so you shouldn't be involved in rubbish. So that goes the same, hopefully, the Rambam for conspiracy theories in today's times. For the Rambam, it's an affront to in human beings' intelligence to go after them, and to what the Torah bans. There's a story, someone, my rabbi in Yeshiva told me a story of Rav Soloveitchik. He overheard Rav Soloveitchik. Someone asked him, he does taekwondo karate in Yeshiva University, and he has to bow before he does the duel with someone else. Is he allowed to bow halachically, according to Jewish law? And Rav Soloveitchik, the guy overheard Rav Soloveitchik saying, no, he said, it's nothing to do with idolatry. Of course you're allowed to bow. You're not allowed to bow because it's nonsense, and the Torah forbids nourishment. And so this Magid just thinking out, he says he's not sure where Rav Soloveitchik knew this or thought this, that the Torah forbids falsehoods, but I think maybe you see it in this Rambam, that for the Rambam, it's to get into conspiracy theories and pseudoscience and rubbish and nonsense is itself problematic for the Torah. So that's the first reason. And the Rambam there lists several reasons, which everyone should read because that's the most famous piece of the Rambam against magic. But then I just don't want to read it aloud. I'm conscious of the time. But then the second reason is very interesting. The second reason, which the Rambam also hints to in the end of that parak, the Rambam says is purely utilitarian. This is very famous. And this ties in with the Rambam. What's the problem with doing nonsense? What's the problem with doing rubbish? And this ties into the Rambam's worldview as a whole, which he finds in his Moreh Nevuchim, which is that that fallacy is completely utilitarian, meaning God's built the natural world for we don't know why. It's the will of God for create the natural world and human beings inside it. And we have to live with that. We have to live in God's Bria. We have to live in his creation properly and normally, as in with complete understanding to live in it. To live in this box of nature that God's created, this amazing box of nature that God created, we have to live in it properly because it's got rules. It's a system, like we explained right at the beginning. And the problem with going after pseudoscience, the problem with going after astrodeterminism and astrology and horoscopes and trying to manipulate and nature and these magical acts is that nonsense digs us into a hole. If we see this with coronavirus and all these people anti-vaxxers, is that it will harm them. If you go after pseudoscience and conspiracies, you will fail in your bodily existence. And the Rambam, it says it so strongly, it says the Beis HaMikdash was destroyed. The second temple was destroyed because they went after astrology in order to safeguard the invasion of the land, instead of looking into military tactics and instead of learning how to build an army and how to fight. Meaning we're stood in this, for the Rambam, we're stood in this box of nature, and we have to live in it properly. And to do that means going after pseudoscience and going after nonsense means we can't do that. And it will mean the Beis HaMikdash will be destroyed and people, maybe people will die. And that firstly, so it's a purely utilitarian, pragmatic reason why magic is forbidden, because the Torah wants us to have our head screwed on in properly, and this is also negah for our times, in properly living in this world. And yeah, that's also, if you look in that whole parak of Yud Aleph in Hilchos Zara, the Rambam says it's all like, this is nonsense, this is rubbish. The whole idea, Menachem Kahn has a whole book on it, which is quite original in terms of study of the Rambam, where it explains that he wants to say this is the Rambam's whole mission, to completely purge out of Judaism all these what he calls proto-Kabbalistic. I don't want to get into any of this stuff, proto-Kabbalistic or even pagan ideas of living in the world, meaning going after amulets and scholars. Thank you, Jack. Yeah, going after amulets and scholars and all this rubbish. The Torah is the most truth and normal thing. The Torah is a manual on how to live in this world, and God created the Bria of this world and then gave us this document. And we have to align. This document is aligned and with this Bria and whatever. That's the Rambam's whole mission, and potentially that's one explanation of the Rambam's whole mission. So there you see, that's why I put it as the second reason, source 14. But there's something else, which is something even broader. We said that for the Ramban, going after magic knocks out, is detrimental for man's whole existence. Man's whole existence is to live in a supernatural plane, is to go to Israel under God's guidance. And this is the whole idea of the Ramban with Nissim Mitzrayim and Schar V'Inash and seeking medical advice or going to Navi, all these famous sugyas in the Ramban al Torah, it ties into this. It's bitachon, and is to live, is have complete hachna. That's why for the Ramban, and Nava is the key trait. Ramban, but is to allow the Kavod Hashem to be manifested in this world, the glory of God to be manifested, and to show a complete dependency on Him, to raise yourself up from the natural world, and to live under God's direct protection and guidance. And that's potentially, we suggested, the Ramban. That's the whole purpose of man's existence. That's why for the Ramban, magic is bad and banned. For the Rambam, we can suggest the same idea clearly. It's not even us suggesting, which is I put as the third reason, which is that the whole purpose of man's life is to come to a complete intellectual emotion. It's a huge debate. What is the end goal of man? What he should do with this? Is it to then give out chesed or halachic observance, or maybe governing a state like a philosopher king? But it doesn't matter. One key stage of the Rambam's, or at the end of man's perfection, is a complete, all-consuming, passionate love of God, based on one of the only ways of man can do this, which is to appreciate the Bria and come to a love of the creation. And that's what the Rambam says in the beginning of the second chapter of Hilchos Yesodei HaTorah. It says, when a person meditates on his matters, meaning the celestial beings and the creation, and the natural world, and all of and the universe and the physical creation, he says, you recognize the creatures, the angels, the spheres, man, and the like, and he appreciates the wisdom of the Holy One and all of his creations. He will add for his love of God, his soul will fast, and his flesh will long and love for God, blessed be he, and stands in fear and awe, and he himself will be humbled. And that's the and it's fleshed out in the 10th paragraph of Hilchos Sheva and in the last 3 chapters of Moreh Nevuchim. And this is the idea for the Rambam, that the man's whole purpose is to use a correct scientific understanding and acknowledgement of scientific wisdom and how God built creation in order to come to this all-consuming drunken love for God. And magic would knock him off that path. Magic and conspiracy theories and pseudoscience and attempting to use the stars and horoscopes and astrology and astrodeterminism to try and change the world and having a false conception of how the world runs would completely stop him from having a true understanding of science, and then coming to appreciate that true understanding, and then coming to an all-consuming love of God. So maybe we can also suggest for the Rambam that magic is banned by the Torah because it hinders a person coming to a love of God through a correct and scientific understanding of the real, which is for the Rambam one of the end goals of a man's, one of the existential goals and the end journey of a person's purpose in life. And so that ends the Chabura of the Ramban and the Rambam. Just want to add that are the middle Rishonim. So other rabbis pointed out to me when I suggested to them, like Ibn Ezra apparently holds of magic, it takes the Rambam for a lot of things. So this is only my limited understanding of the Ramban versus the Rambam. But yeah, so that's it.